welcome back you guys to the channel. My name is Zach, and today we're reviewing an Apple exclusive movie called Finch. The general plot of the movie is Finch is trying to survive the post-apocalypse with his friendly dog and his newly created robot named Jeff. Finch has basically scavenged the entire surrounding area dry, and there's no supplies or food left. So he has enough food to last a couple of days, maybe a week, but the problem is that there's a giant superstorm coming that will last about a month and a half. So he doesn't have enough food or supplies to hunker down in his little bunker and outlast the storm. So Finch decides to set off with his dog and Jeff to find a new location to live and gather supplies. So this movie feels like a long, short clip from Love, Death, and Robots, except there's Tom Hanks in the movie and it has no balls. Not Tom Hanks has no balls, the movie has no balls. And that sucks because I love Love, Death, and Robots. It's just that this movie is lacking creativity or a willingness to go deeper into certain allegories, if that makes any sense. There's so many interesting ideas, there's so many interesting situations and ways they could have utilized the plot and the characters and the environment, but they decide, for whatever reason, to just kind of pick the most boring, safe option for everything. It's really weird. They could have done something completely different. For example, without spoiling anything, this movie is set up to be a real tearjerker, but it just kind of becomes this weird road trip movie where Finch is trying to teach his newly created robot, Jeff, life lessons and how to survive in the environments. And that could have been really compelling. It could have been. The problem is the interactions between Jeff and Finch become really boring really fast and actually start to annoy me. They just start becoming really annoying, and that's a huge problem when it comes to this movie because the movie, there's only two people that speak, you know, like, there's the dog, obviously, but there's only two people that actually speak to each other in this movie, and that is Jeff and Finch. If they don't have good chemistry together, and you don't like them and their pair together, and them talking and learning things with each other, that's 90% of the movie. You're just not going to like the movie. And I feel like the dialogue, and the camaraderie between those two characters just falls really flat, and it's bad. It's just weird because the dialogue is saved for either exposition purposes, just explaining shit that you kind of need to know in the movie, or it's dialogue between Jeff and Finch about rudimentary topics that aren't very compelling or interesting at all, or it is Finch berating Jeff for being, like, really stupid and f***ing something up. So you never get, like, a feel-good moment in this movie between the characters. There's actually some interesting ideas and topics they bring up in this movie, but they drop those topics so fast that they might as well have never even brought them up in the first place. It kind of feels like this movie is trying to be a family-friendly, post-apocalyptic movie that everybody could watch, sort of like WALL-E. The reason is they try to zap some of the suffering and negativity out of the movie with comedy, you know, when it comes to Jeff. The problem is that Jeff has a lot of cringy comedy that just kind of, it's really bad. Like, lots of slapstick humor, him falling down, lots of really goofy, like, it's cringe-worthy comedy. There's a point where he looks up in the sky and goes, where's the cheese up in the sky? Because Finch says, oh, the ozone layer's like Swiss cheese. So he goes like, there's cheese up there? It's like, come on. The joke is over, and it just lasts way too long. So it's like, ugh, God, even the comedy in this movie is really bad, and they were trying to put that in there to kind of brighten up the movie a little bit. By the movie's merits alone, I'm going to give this movie a C+. It's just, like, better than average. You can watch it. It's okay, you know? It's an okay movie. I'm not going to really remember it later. It's lukewarm at best, you know? The thing is, though, is that this movie had great ideas going for it. There's so many options and ideas they could have used and decided to not use for some reason, that it almost feels like a D movie, in my personal opinion, because they had so much interesting stuff they could have used, and it was right there in their face, but they decided not to utilize it for some reason. And that's just a damn shame. Let me go ahead and get into spoilers real quick, okay? Here's a warning. So let me go ahead and get some of the easy spoilers out of the way. The first spoiler is Finch is actually dying. He's dying from either radiation poisoning or something, or being from the, you know, going outside and being exposed to radiation for so prolonged periods of time. He probably has cancer, something along those lines. And he's making robot Jeff to protect his dog later. You know, his dog is like his best friend. He needs somebody after he's gone to protect the dog. So that's kind of the first spoiler in this movie. It seemed like this movie had a couple of allegories I thought they were going to really dive deep into, and it would have been really awesome, but they just didn't for some reason. One in the movie is trust, and in the beginning of the movie, they kind of established that Finch doesn't trust anybody. The reason he doesn't trust people is because people in the post-apocalypse are pretty dangerous. I mean, you've kind of seen that in zombie movies and shit like that too, but they showcase that by explaining to the audience that he goes out in the daytime when it's like 150 degrees out to scavenge for stuff with his engineered, like, super space suit that nobody else can make, because he doesn't want to come in contact with people at night that will scavenge or shoot at him or attack him and stuff like that. He thinks it's easier in the day. He just doesn't trust people. So that's kind of the first thing that they talk about. So subsequently, he doesn't really trust Jeff with his dog yet, and Jeff is not very trustworthy at this point in the movie. So there's this whole thing about, like, you know, Finch is going to have to trust Jeff at some point because he's going to have to take care of the dog that he, you know, is the whole point of the robot even existing, which is kind of funny because it reminds me of Rick and Morty when Rick says to that little robot on the counter, you know, that's passing the butter, he's like,
"What is my purpose?"
"You pass butter."
"Oh my god."
"Yeah, welcome to the club, pal."
They have this exact line in this movie, and it's kind of funny. I kind of giggled at that because I like Rick and Morty. It's like, oh, the robot's like, why was I made? He's like, to protect that fucking dog. There's never, like, a big event in the movie that is like, oh, now you can trust Jeff. Because in the movie, Jeff isn't very trustworthy. He, like, fucks up the car. He breaks a couple things. He falls down a lot. He doesn't listen to Finch very often. He's kind of like, he just kind of does what he wants sometimes. So Finch being able to trust him is kind of a big part in this movie, and there's no big event that, like, cements his trust into Jeff. It just, at the end of the movie, they kind of just trust each other for some reason, and it doesn't really make any sense. So there needed to be, like, a big event where it's like, oh my god, I trust you, Jeff. You are a trustworthy person now, but just never do it. I don't know why. Now, you end up understanding, like, near the end of the movie that Finch is an engineer that has basically produced artificial intelligence, okay? So that's the thing that usually takes over the world in most movies. But he created a good robot that will be a good person later, you know? So he created artificial intelligence, and they never bring up the idea of what makes a human or what makes, like, a person, which is kind of needed in a movie about trusting a robot with a living creature, you know? Like, you need to trust this robot. You need to make him more humanized. You have to humanize him, because just being like, I'm gonna die someday, and then this fucking toaster is gonna look after my dog, doesn't really feel good to me. You have to humanize the robot and make him, like, make him a person in my eyes, you know? It doesn't feel like they ever even tried to draw that line in the movie where it's like, what makes a person? What makes him a human? You know, why is this robot different than other robots? You know, it's like, you kind of need to establish that in a movie based on artificial intelligence, you know? They literally don't touch that concept at all, and that is really stupid for a movie like this. So they establish early in the movie, or at least right in the beginning of the movie, that Jeff has 4 big rules that he can't, like, break, okay? Actually, I can only remember 2 off the top of my head, but one of them, the very first rule, is you can't harm a human being, okay? And then the last rule is that you have to protect this dog no matter what, and that basically overrules any other rule. So at a certain point in this movie, I was thinking, like, okay, well, that rule overrules everything else, meaning that he could probably kill somebody if it was to protect that dog. So I was hoping for, like, this moment in the movie where he goes, like, into, like, Iron Giant fuck you mode and just starts beating the shit out of people that are trying to hurt the dog. Because I was assuming, like, at a certain point they're going to meet somebody in this movie that is going to try to, like, either take their stuff away or hurt the dog, maybe for food or Finch or something like that. And they never really get into that. They don't actually they don't come in contact with anybody in this movie. So it's kind of just Jeff and Finch being together. I just wish there would have been a cool moment like that, and they don't ever utilize that. That's another kind of idea that came off the top of my head, which they just don't use. Now, I had a bunch of ideas in my head, so this next part of my video, my spoiler-filled stuff, is just stuff that I thought would have been interesting for the movie if they would have utilized it. Maybe show that the robot is starting to slowly become more and more human. It doesn't seem like that in this movie. There's no character development when it comes to Jeff. The other thing is, too, is that maybe, which would have been really cool, is that maybe there was a program that Jeff had in him that basically copied Finch, you know, his creator. So maybe, like, he starts learning how to be just like Finch, so that when Finch finally dies near the end of the movie, he, like, becomes basically, like, maybe his voice starts changing, and he sounds like Finch at the end of the movie to protect the dog. I think that would have been really cool, especially, let's say, if Finch did something heroic, and the robot sees this really heroic act, and basically syncs up exactly what's going on and the ideas that are happening in that situation, and then at that point in the movie, he becomes fully Finch, you know? That would have been really cool. I thought that would have been a cool idea, but no, they don't use that, obviously. Maybe there was a situation where Finch is about to die and the dog gets taken off by people, and the robot has to protect the dog at all costs. And he goes in there and he protects the shit out of the dog. He beats people up, does some sort of action movie sort of stuff. I mean, he's a robot, and this robot's really fucking strong in the movie, by the way. And he gets the dog back, and he brings it back to Finch, and Finch is, like, on his deathbed at the moment. And then at that point in the movie, Finch is like, Jeff, you did well. You have shown me how willing you are to protect this dog and that you are trustworthy. Boom, there you go. Something along those lines. Jesus Christ. What happens at the end of the movie is basically they just, by the way, so this is just kind of, it's so dumb. Basically, at the end of the movie, they drive at a certain point. Jeff is driving the car, and they find a piece of the ozone layer that isn't contaminated by the sun. You know, it's not like leaking through and just burning everything. So as he's driving on this long stretch of highway, there's a couple bugs that hit the windshield, and it's like, oh shit, there's bugs. You know, bugs can't survive in 150-degree temperature. So they go outside. Finch sticks his hand outside. The sun's not cooking his hand alive. So they go outside and they have like a kind of a picnic, like an outing out there. And there's this point where Jeff is throwing a ball with the dog. You know, Finch is like, throw the ball, Jeff, you know, and they throw the ball or whatever. And then he ends up dying during that scene, and he's just like, oh yeah, the robot, he can throw a ball with the dog. You don't know if Jeff can protect the dog from the sunlight. He barely knew that. You don't know if he can protect him from people. You don't know that. Like, there's so many other situations that Jeff is just so incompetent at that I would not personally trust this fucking robot with my dog, you know? So that doesn't really make any sense. It's just, I don't know, there's just so many interesting things they could have done with this movie, and stuff that would have been a real tearjerker, you know, at the end. Finch dying while Jeff protecting the dog with, like, his life, or something like that. Something big, something memorable, and not some pitiful little dribble at the end of the movie. The ending of this movie is like when you have the last, like, spurt of piss, when you're trying to drain it in the fucking toilet, you know what I mean? Just dribbles a little bit. That's the ending of this movie. It's just, God, man. There's just so much stuff they could have utilized in this movie. They just didn't. I don't know. But that's my review, you guys. I think this movie was just okay. It kind of pissed me off because if me, a non-writer, you know, can come up with better ideas off the top of my head, not even thinking very hard, I'm sure, like, a professional writer could do better, you know? At least I think they could. So that's why it annoyed me, you guys. Anyways, that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and see ya! Hey, you made it to the end. That means you must enjoy my content, so go ahead and tap that subscribe button for me. And if you don't like my content, subscribe anyways. My videos are proven to make your schlong longer. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram for discussions and movie topics. And thank you so much for the support. You guys are awesome. See ya.